In theory, this is a set of gears, but in practice they don't work so well because each of the gears only has 2 teeth.
These gears aren't going to be very useful, but gears in general are designed with continuous surface contact in mind, and so maybe these can be useful for something else. Like, for example, a stacking game.
The gameplay is easy, and it works as follows. When it's your turn, you place a piece, then your opponent places a piece, wherever, but the piece has to touch the piece that's already on the board. Now it's my turn again. The first time that somebody puts a piece down that isn't touching the base, from that point forward, nobody else is allowed to touch the base. There's no rule about orientation. You can position it any way that you want. And the next time somebody touches the base, they lose. No 2 games are ever the same. And it's oftentimes very impressive just how much you can get away with. They're kind of sculptures. You can just let it go in any direction. There's no real rule. They grab pretty well. We're making these, and the template's in the description, and let's make a set of 32 of them. With a thickness that's just under 1/2 of an inch and just over 1 centimeter, in order to get 32 of these, we'll need at least 15 inches. And we'll add 4 inches for all of the cuts, so let's cut a nice clean piece of 2x4 that's around 19 inches. The finished part is about 2 7/8 wide, so we have a little bit of room to work with. Let's start by squaring up one side on the table saw. Next up is the template, one of which will go on each end of the 2x4, but we'll start with just one. Now let's pick 2 sides that we want to keep and hold our template flush to those. Now we cut away this and this. Now the blade height can go to a little over halfway up. Now for the cove. It looks complicated, but it's not. We're really just passing the work over the blade at a 13-degree angle. You'll be able to find more information about this adjustable fence jig, and this is just a feather board to hold it in place. An alternative might be to just nibble out 1 cut at a time with the table saw until you get the curve approximate, and then you could just sand out the rest. Of course, a core box bit with the router can also get us pretty close to this curve. Whatever it takes to get there.
Just remember that the goal here is to have mirror symmetry over 2 axes. This means that we can think of the molding as having 4 quadrants. And so if you make a cut in one of the quadrants, you should also make a similar cut in the other three.
In order to get perfectly centered cove cuts, after you've made your final pass, flip the stock this way and make another final pass. This will ensure that you get rid of any minor variations from side to side. But for the remainder of this process, every time we set the table saw, we're going to use it to make all 4 cuts. "22.5" is a frequent enough angle in woodworking that I have a special insert plate for it. There's a really simple reason why this angle comes up so often. If we imagine a vertical cut as 90 degrees and a horizontal cut as 0, the cut we just made is a 45 degrees angle, which is halfway from horizontal to vertical. Now, if we imagine that we want to get halfway from nothing to 45, that's simply 22.5 and that's what we'll use to nip off these corners. I'm telling you what you already know. Half of 45 degrees is 22.5, and so on. But that doesn't mean that it isn't also important. Cutting a problem in half can be an effective basis for solving complex problems. Our saw cuts are restricted to being linear, so we end up with these chunky approximations of curves. But we can refine them, a piece at a time, to get something that's infinitely variable. An early approximation of the circle was made by Archimedes, using something called the method of exhaustion, which is a similar idea. And then later, there was calculus, which is the study of continuous change. Big ideas can have simple origins. We just go around shaving off the corners. Keeping a pattern on both sides gives you a target to aim for from both directions, but it also helps in this process if you keep count of the number of strokes with your plane and do the same on all 4 sides. Take your time and it's easy as pie. Okay, no more math puns. Sanding block should be hard, not a soft one, because we're just trying to take off the high spots, remember? Also, in the cove, a dowel.
There are 3 ways that I'm likely to cut these into slices. The first way is the bandsaw, which is pretty easy, but bandsaws are not known for making the smoothest cuts. The miter saw is the second way, and if you have a sharp blade, this wouldn't be bad. But the downfall here is that miter saws have a thick kerf, that is, a thick cut, so it wastes a lot of material. Also, unsupported material splinters. All things considered, it's my recommendation to use a table saw sled. If you do this with a 7 1/4 inch blade that's sharp, you'll get a nice slice. You can also use a scrap block of 2x4 to keep your fingers out of harm's way. Doing this is reasonably secure. These parts were held to a tight tolerance because they're also for use in another game, which will be the subject of a different video. I hope you'll join me then. In the meantime, if you can take one thing from this video, it should be that the key to a curve is to take it a piece at a time. If a step gets you even a little bit closer, then it was a success. I appreciate your continued interest.